Welcome, everybody. Thank you, all of you who've come to join us today. My name's Clayton Byers, and I just wanted to say hi, welcome you, and turn this over real briefly to Dr. Jesse Zhu, who's going to say a few things about this webinar and the series of webinars that's been going on here. So Jesse, go ahead and take the wheel.
Hi, hello. My name is Jesse Zhu, and I'm a professor from Western University. So today we're having this second symposium of the Global Conference on Engineering Education, Challenges and Opportunities. And today's symposium is chaired by Clayton Byers, myself, and in association with the American Society of Engineering Education. And here's my name. I'm a distinguished professor from Western. I'm also a director board of the Canadian Academy of Engineering. In particular, I'm the chair of the CAE Engineering Education Group. CAE is the International Council of Academics, Engineering, and Technological Science. So it's an independent, non-political, non-governmental organization that covers each of the academies in each country. So the main chair today is Clayton Byers. He's assistant professor of engineering from Trinity College in Hartford, USA. He's an excellent teacher, has many experience and interest in classroom teaching. I'm very happy to have Clayton to work with me on this special session. Quickly welcome everybody to the second symposium on the Global Conference of Engineering Education. Today, we are holding the second symposium as part of the ASEE Annual Conference Program. And thanks to ASEE to giving us a session. The subject of today's symposium is the future perspective of engineering education and the impact of pandemic. This second symposium is co-sponsored by the Canadian Academy of Engineering and Western University, plus, of course, ASEE. And now I'd like to invite Robert Korhal to speak a few words on behalf of the Canadian Academy of Engineering.
Oh, thank you, Jesse. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you to Clayton and Jesse for organizing this. The Canadian Academy of Engineering has a deep interest in education and how we are going to form the next generation of engineers. And it's not just the Canadian Academy, as Jesse mentioned, the International Council of Academies of Engineering and Technological Sciences has a great interest in how we train engineers to address the great challenges ahead of us and take advantage of all of the advances in teaching technologies, many of which we've seen demonstrated over the last 18 months. So great, looking forward to the conference and to the insights and to the studies that have gone behind this. And Jesse, I will hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Here is our Dean, Kenneth Corley. He unfortunately could not make it, so he wanted me to pass his greetings to everybody here. And Western is the sponsor of this conference series. It's my university, and that is my Dean. So I'm going to quickly present a few slides about the concept of this global conference and how we have this going. So we were running a conference series called Global Conference on Engineering Education. And this is the second one. And the concept is to discuss about education. So here, if we review in the past many years, what kind of method of education we have. In the past, we have this individually learning experience. So like masters and appendix, like carpenter, they will teach you how to make each pieces one by one. This is up to probably 18 or 1900. The present system is so-called the scientific system. So you teach layer by layer, primary school, high school, university. But what is coming now, it seems to be like, like my kids getting on the internet, they just learn whatever they grab. Initially, I was complaining, what are you doing? But gradually you see, hey, they probably forming a network of some kind of knowledge. So this is coming. This is, I believe, the changing. You can call it diversified teaching, learning, or chaotic. So what is happening with this and the so-called diversified teaching or learning. And there are many topics being discussed. For example, dynamic change in education, and then much diversified needs. We also talk about impact of technology and customized, personalized learning. We're talking about those concepts. And lifelong learning, education for entrance, but also for seasoned engineers. People need to continue learning, otherwise you're outdated. So this is kind of a newer education other than the traditional education. And then preparedness at all levels, and what to expect in 20, 25 years, 50 years, or 100 years. What are changes are happening. So leadership need to lead, not just to code. So this is the message we want to get outside, get going, and then we want to act on that. So the pandemic, of course, I'm a chemical engineer, so I call it a catalyst. Catalyst makes things happen faster. So the pandemic certainly is bad, but it also served as a catalyst for change. So with all the online teachings, there are also issues, but there are also benefits, right? For example, you can go to more remote areas, you have more equity and access of good teachers. So it is an exponential increase in the use of online teaching tools. Okay? A serious problem, but it also brings some benefit that are worth exploring in the future. So this is where we are at. The unprecedented scale of online teaching start to reshape engineering education. So I don't want to go to details, but your guys are bringing, our speakers are bringing a lot of new ideas. All I'm saying is that the pandemic is accelerating what would be happening. So in that regard, we want to organize a conference also in a bit of an innovative way. Instead of having to be sitting there for 5 days, we have different symposium or different sessions organized at different places and different time. So the first one was on June the 15th by the Canadian Academy of Engineering. So we opened that one. And now it's this one in July, sponsored by ASEE. So I talked to them. So we decided to work together to have the second symposium. And then there are many more to come. Well, at least a few more to come. And we want to use this way to bring the engineering educators together worldwide and gradually link them together. And all those things will be on the internet, okay? So even though we probably don't have enough audience today because the Far East is after midnight, China, Australia, Japan, and Korea, they're all midnight. But we'll be posting this on YouTube and people can view them. So we can still serve the purpose. Today we have an exciting symposium thanks to Clayton. He was the main driver in organizing that. We have excellent 9 speakers, a lot of experience, relatively younger speaker, which is good because you're representing the future. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. I'll pass back to Clayton and then to our excellent speakers. Thank you very much for joining this. Clayton.
Thank you, Jesse. So at this point, let's go ahead and kick this off with Dr. Kerry Douglas and Dr. Julie Martin, who are going to talk about the future of online engineering education, more with respect to what's effective, less effective, and simply depressing. So Kerry, Julie, the floor is yours.
All right, well, I am Kerry Douglas, and I'm going to start us off here. I am a professor of engineering education at Purdue University, and I first started conducting online research in online education, engineering, and virtual learning environments back in 2015. I've also been teaching in a large first-year engineering course at Purdue since about 2015. And then when the pandemic hit and the schools were moved fully remote in response to online, it was actually my first time personally experiencing online learning, both from teaching in a grad course and then teaching 120 undergraduates online. And then also because I'm a mom of 4 kids and they all went online as well. And so I brought all those experiences with me as we started thinking about the research and things we were learning. And my colleague, Dr. Julie Martin, has been doing engineering education research for the last 15 years. And her research has been focused on the role of social supports in undergraduate engineering education, their persistence, how the social support is influencing their educational outcomes, and particularly in relation to students who've been historically marginalized in engineering. So in March of 2020, we decided to kind of put our two areas of expertise together. And we wanted to study how engineering instructors are moving their courses online and what that would mean for undergraduate students. So the other thing I want to mention to you is that this is going to be a pretty interactive, or we hope a pretty interactive presentation. And so if you want to pull up another tab on your computer and you just get ready, like you will be going to menti.com throughout it. And so I kind of wanted to give you the heads up a little bit here, that if you thought you were just going to sit and watch and maybe like clean out your email inbox at the same time, like I'm hoping you'll actually participate with us instead. So as you can see, there's we've got our work, WFH is the work from home coworkers, by the way. So we've got our pets with us, and you may hear our pets because they are for real with us. Claire is always by my side. So when we think about the last 18 months, year plus, what lessons have you learned? So, Julie and I, we brought in with us, previous research experience. We brought in like experiences from loved ones, friends who were going through the online learning, lessons from our own instructional background. But I'm like, no one in here, no one on this call is now new to online learning. Like you all, like no one here is a blank slate. And so we're going to share things we've learned from our research, but we're definitely not, so great of expertise here. I think everyone that's on this call, like we have things to learn from. So what lessons have you learned? What in the last year, like, what are some things you've learned? So we're going to go to, here you go, this menti.com. And if you can just type in a few words of like, what lessons have you learned? So you can use that code, and actually it'll be the same code throughout the presentation. So we'll take an extra minute here to get you started, but as soon as folks start entering, it should start showing up. So there's the QR code if you prefer that. Has anyone started entering? There we go. We got some things popping in. Looks like we got about 15 seconds till that voting's closed. So is this where we're kind of landing about what we've learned? Adaptive. Oh, here we go. So actually interesting. So this is a word cloud where the most commonly said word is be bigger than the others. And it's really interesting that exhausting and organized are really big. So that means that at least more than one of you have put that in. And I think we all could say online, if anyone in 2019 thought that doing online teaching was going to be like somehow a shortcut to teaching, like that is not true. Like I think most of us would agree now, like doing online, so it looks organization and prep in advance is crucial. They need new approaches. There's lots of challenges. People weren't prepared. That's very true. And I like to distinguish between what happened in the spring of 2020 and really referring to that as emergency remote instruction. That was not online learning. That was just like we were in courses that were fully designed and going, like we were traveling in person, and then a whole other thing had to happen that we did not have the time to really plan and do in the way we would if we knew we were going to be teaching online. So that was more like the fall, I would say, was more of the online. Spring was more of that. All right. So, you know, pre 2020, there were lots of innovations happening. So advances in supercomputing, for example, led to simulations that had previously not been able to be done like at an individual level, like they were being done, you know, at a much larger scale. So for this is the example from NanoHub, where the supercomputing enables them to have simulations in the classroom. So the students can actually do experiments online and learn things that had not previously been possible. Other, like we keep seeing more and more uses of AI and different AI applications. So you've probably heard about, this was in 2016, where there was and I think they still do it, a professor at Georgia Tech who had integrated essentially the Watson framework, the Watson, they called it Jill Watson, who was as a TA. And when they let the students know, they were surprised, like they had been actually interacting and having their questions from a bot. There's also a tool that uses natural language processing called Docuscope, developed by researchers at Carnegie Mellon, and they're able to analyze students' texts for helping teach students how to learning to write, and can provide visualization tools back so that the students can learn from their writing. There's also a tool that I've been involved in called Sketchtivity, and it's based off of giving sketch recognition to teach students learning, like in early design courses, how to sketch and do perspective sketching with that automated feedback. So at the same time, pre-2020, the number of online offerings had been going through a period of surging. This was taken in 2020, that some were starting to call it the second year of the MOOC. So if you're somebody who's ever followed along with those massive open online courses, you might notice that, or you may have noticed the number of universities that have been being partnered with those entities was really growing. Lots of very prestigious universities had made large investments to join in the platforms. So as of 2020, there were over 950 universities that were partnering with some type of MOOC platform, and there were 67 MOOC-based degrees. There's a lot of graduate courses and things as well. In 2019, the former dean of computer science at Georgia Tech had been interviewed, and he said the future of computer science education is, like he said, the revolution will be digitized. And that was in an article from the ASEE Communications. And he was talking about not just doing the online courses for master's students, but taking it back down so that enhancing computer science education so that it could be reached at K-12 levels and with K-12 teachers, which is a little bit of a push because most of the online offerings pre-2020, when we talked about online engineering education, we're really more towards graduate level. This is like someone saying, no, we're actually investing and moving towards doing undergrad level online. So while all these online things were going on, there was another sort of thing brewing in engineering education, which was active learning reform. So this is a picture, it was a painting from 1350 in Venice. And what you can see here is that most undergraduate education had not changed a whole lot since 1350. So it's interesting, the people in the front were the ones like the studious ones, you know, like, okay, I'm going to take notes and look, right? Like they're actually looking at, but yeah, so not a whole lot. Like, I think a lot of folks were, you know, if we thought that 500 students in one lecture hall wasn't going to be all that effective, then I kind of think like, well, why do we think, you know, 5,000 students in a single online course is somehow going to be even more effective? You know, and so there's these things like, okay, well, like this knowledge we need to be able to take forward with us. So with the active learning reforms, there were things going on like, you know, oh, there's the teaching and learning, lots of the books there, and there's lots of centers for instructional excellence. I think a lot of colleges of engineering have started, you know, or had been partnering with centers on their campus to try to improve undergraduate campus or undergraduate education. And then there were also buildings being built and changed to accommodate a more active learning format. So this is actually a picture from my Purdue rival, IU, but it was happening at other places as well. You know, Purdue built a building called the, you know, is essentially the Active Learning Center was in the title of the name. And I know other major research universities were doing similarly. The other thing we knew before 2020 was that students need social capital. And this had been studied in a variety of settings. And then in the last, you know, 10 or 15 years, really with our colleague here, Dr. Julie Martin, really added a bulk of the evidence that engineering students, like other students, really do need social capital to be successful. And when they develop those connections, then they gain knowledge about like how to negotiate or navigate through their major, their institution career, and giving them opportunities to access that hidden curriculum, the parts that aren't so obvious to folks maybe, you know, who aren't fifth generation engineer, and how to make appropriate academic and career decisions. And it also, those social connections help them feel that they can persist through the rigorous engineering curriculum. But then, as you all know, like the pandemic forced changes really quickly, and instructors were given little to no advance notice that they were going to have to move online. And, you know, if we're aware that the vast majority of engineering faculty are hired with, let's say, less than ideal training in how to teach effectively, we could be sure that even fewer engineering faculty had received any training in how to teach effectively online. And institutions offered various levels of support for that change. And, you know, it's one thing to just post video lectures online, but there's little guidance on how to go about doing a lab or team-based activities, service learning, design projects, capstones, etc. And if you tried, if you tried to go into the research base on how to do these things well, what most likely you'd find is that the vast majority of research in online learning has been done with very different populations than what we have with our undergraduate engineers, and very different courses. So a lot of the online literature is based in contexts of graduate education, and a lot of it's teacher education or related areas of education. Communication, not, and there's some with getting more with the engineering, but most of it really is different than what our undergraduate. So now let's stop here for you. I just went through my big long talk. Pre-2020, what did you think? Did you think that undergraduate engineering courses could be taught effectively online? So I'm really curious about this. So if you could go back to that menti.com, that would be awesome. Like, to what extent do you think engineering courses could be taught online? This is back in 2019, so no future, no present self-talking. Like, what did you think? We're getting a little movement there. Okay, I think we're good to put, oh, here, we'll give everyone just a few more seconds you got 10 more seconds to place your vote. Okay, so in our audience, we have about a 2.8. So it looks like just under that midpoint of it can be effective, like strongly, like just under the midpoint of saying, I agree that undergraduate engineering courses can be taught effective online in 2019. And I'll be honest, like I said, I've been doing research in online since 2015, and I had never been an advocate of doing it at undergraduate level. So if I were answering myself, I would have given it like a 1. So I was very curious. So it seems like there's quite a bit, like some folks really thought it could be done. Quite the spread we have here. That's very interesting. Okay, so now you can be where you're thinking now. So with your current thinking, to what extent do you agree that undergraduate engineering courses can be effectively taught online? So we still have some that are totally 1. Interesting. Oh, look at that. This is so fun to watch that date, like how, like the updates here. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to place your vote. So, all right. So we're at a 3-5. So that's kind of what I was thinking for myself, that I've moved a little bit further. So it's kind of interesting to see that everyone here with us today, after the last 18 months, that we've shifted a little. So now we're on the more towards agreeing that it can be done, but there's definitely still folks that are in the disagree spot. But it's interesting because there's more starting to agree. The truth is, it turns out the answer to that is that of whether or not undergraduate courses can be, or undergraduate engineering courses can be taught effectively online. I mean, it turns out it depends. And there's a lot of factors that contribute to whether or not it is effective. And since the pandemic started, I've received two awards to study student learning and probe at these questions a little bit more. And so one is with Dr. Julie Martin, who's with me today, for an NSF Rapid to study approaches to online implementation and social support to engineering courses. And then another one is from the Koch Family Foundation with my colleague, Professor Chris Brenton. He's also at Purdue. He's in ASEE. And the purpose of that was studying how to explore how undergraduate engineering students were using online resources during the time of the pandemic, how they were interacting with each other and the instructional teams. So now I'm gonna pass that over to Julie to talk a little bit more about the research that we've been doing.
So we're really excited to share some information from these studies that we've been working on. So we have some case study research, some survey research and data analytics. And rather than really going into the details of each individual study, we're going to share with you some highlights from across the studies. So we looked at 4 courses in depth using the case study methodology. These were design or project-based courses where the majority of the assignments were team-based. We studied a first-year Intro to Engineering course, a sophomore level course, and some senior capstone courses. And I'll be sharing a little bit of some of the data from the interview portion of that with you as some illustrations today. We also did some survey research where we collected more than 1,800 student responses to surveys at 2 different institutions in the US and the UK. And then Kerry is working with Dr. Brenton on the other project that she mentioned, that's learning patterns of more than 2,000 first-year engineering students. So we wanted to ask a question before we get started with this. We're interested in hearing from you about 3 characteristics of effective online learning. So if you go back to the Mentee link, there should be an opportunity there for you to enter 3 words that are a characteristic of effective online learning. And I think we've got about a minute for you to answer those questions. So we're seeing a lot so far about how effective online learning needs to be responsive and engaging. Fosters community. That's a very interesting response, because I think you're definitely going to see some of our findings that align with exactly what you're saying here. Expectations clear times 100. There's something else that we're going to be mentioning as well. So it sounds like, and you've got about 15 seconds left if you haven't answered yet, that based on your experiences teaching or learning online, that you've got a good sense of some of the things that make online learning effective. And we're going to share some characteristics of effective online learning that we found from our 3 studies. So I think this is the final word cloud that's going up there now. Thanks. So from our research, we've seen the following characteristics for effective undergraduate engineering courses online. So as you mentioned in that poll, you've got to have clear learning goals. The students need to be connected with each other. The instructional team needs to be connected with the students. We have to have activities that are aligning with learning goals for the course. And students need regular feedback. And the other thing that they really need, particularly in a project-based course, is to be engaged in projects that have good team management. So I'm going to share a couple of examples of the kinds of things that students said about these different characteristics next. So with respect to the characteristic of having the instructional team connected to the students, I'm going to share this quote with you, which was from a first-year student, where they're actually talking about somewhat improved access to the instructional teams during the pandemic compared to before, when it was in person. So that student says, on Zoom, it was a little more relaxed because we were the only people in that little breakout room. And it felt like the instructor was very invested in figuring out what the problem with us. Her, as well as any of the TAs that would join to help us. She was definitely offering the same help which she would have in person, which was really nice. So this is an opportunity for online learning to actually offer some enhancements over in person, where the instructors, walking around the room in a large group answering questions. And the next quote is also from our first-year student. In this quote, the student is comparing an experience they had in a computer science course with the first-year engineering course, which was the one that we were studying. And they said they kind of require us to work out how we could work together. So this is in their first-year course. They said, my computer science course, they're just like, okay, you have the same lab partners, just go figure it out. Ready? Go. But in the intro to engineering course, they made us submit a document that told them how we were going to meet and all that stuff. So they were kind of like holding us accountable. So when I read about this instructional strategy, I always really think about how we all require students to work in teams, but how many of us actually provide scaffolding for that team dynamic? So I think this is something that we could really learn from. So now we're going to move on to some characteristics of ineffective courses. And I want to draw on your knowledge here again. So we're going to ask you the question, like, what hasn't been so great? So thinking about like a personal example, or maybe an example that you've heard of, where the online learning experience wasn't particularly effective. What were the characteristics of that online learning opportunity? So going back to the mentee poll, we're going to give you a minute to list some words that you think are characteristics of ineffective online education. Okay, so we're seeing things about long videos and nonstop talking and tech issues and things that are passive, things, courses that are disorganized. Oh, I love the phrase black hole for grades. That actually came up a lot in our research. Tedious, not interactive. Y'all, yes, exactly. Boring. Yes, these are definitely things that we saw reflected in our research. And so you've got just about 10 seconds left to finish this, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what we learned from our studies. Okay, so the biggest word here is disorganized and boring. So let's look at what we found and compare that to your own experience. So, we heard students talking about ineffective courses in terms of having little opportunity for connection both between the students and that also the little personal interaction with the instructional team. We heard students talking about how they felt like when courses moved online from being in person, that there was a lot of busy work or even added requirements from what the course used to have. And then when those requirements change or the learning goals change, that's really confusing and frustrating for students. Going back to what we talked about before with the team projects and really working in an effective teams, when those were unsupervised or disorganized, that was ineffective. And then also, when students couldn't get answers to their questions and or got slow feedback, that was really ineffective. So we're going to look for a minute about the opportunity for connection between students. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. There are two quotes here that I think really capture the sense of loss that students had. These were from two senior capstone students. They said, one student said, much of what I was learning from my peers was from studying together, group work, labs, which has really been taken away from me. And then another student talks about just sort of being alone in the basement. And so these were examples of that sense of loss that we saw over and over again. So I'm going to skip over to the ones about that were just plain depressing. And this is going to echo some of the things that you said, as well as, so I'm just going to, Kerry, I'm just going to go straight to those findings for the sake of time. So we heard students, talking about some of these characteristics were just plain depressing, and that learning in isolation was certainly one of those. And so we had a student who was a first-year engineering student comparing their experience in first-year engineering just to their math course. And they talked about how the recitation session was just completely thrown out the window. And when that happened, they just had to absorb the material all on their own. So that's another, that's one of those things that's just depressing to hear about. So we're really at the point where we're at a fork in the road. We have to decide what to keep and what to keep and what to discard from what we know about online learning. So Kerry's going to talk to us a little bit about that.
So as we look to the future and we think about, the point of the symposium, we have, there are some things that we want to take with us. So effective online engineering education is going to have a holistic view of education, and there's no dichotomy between online and in person. Like, our job is the same, and that's to teach the engineering students the best we can with the tools that we have. And so I want to really challenge folks to avoid a bricks versus clicks mentality, that one is not inherently better or worse than the other. It's really how it's done. And then when I think of effective online engineering education, it's going to be based on a solid research foundation, that activities need to the content, which needs to align to the assessment. Like, there's nothing new about this. These are things that we have known for quite a long time. Similarly, effective online engineering education in the future is going to be based on a solid research foundation. And this book, I want to just point out, I know the How People Learn 1 got a lot of attention. I don't know how much, I don't hear people referring to How People Learn 2 as much, but it was published in 2018. It's a consensus report from the National Academies. And there are really good recommendations that I think speak directly to engineering like using technology in the classroom and how to integrate it. And it's really based off of that synthesis of research. And so there's a lot there that we can take in and build from. The other thing I think about effective online engineering education for the future connects learners together. And this is particularly important with undergraduate engineering students for multiple reasons. One is that, knowledge is developed when we exchange with others. When I hear what you think, my understanding might deepen, or you influence my perspective. And for engineers to design solutions to our most pressing needs, they need to hear diverse voices. It can't just be my only voice. So the when and the how are really the more important questions. So sometimes when in my research, like folks will want to collaborate with me, or they'll mention like, oh, I hear you do assessment, or you do, you do stuff with online. And I wonder if there's ever been a study, is online than in person, or in person more effective? And I'm going to be real, like, I can be more blunt than when someone asks me that directly, but the question doesn't make sense, because it's really how you do it. And you don't have to look very far to find really well done online courses and really bad ones. And you can do the same thing on college campuses. I mean, the same college campus can have excellent undergraduate courses and really shoddy ones. I mean, the variety is out there. And it's really how we do it. And so when I think about the way that innovation, and when we think about all these big ideas that can happen, the emerging technologies, to me, effective online education and effective innovation, if it were a three-legged stool, it would be based off of a solid foundation of understanding how people learn, providing students the support to be successful, and then really having goals that keep in mind, we're preparing engineers to work in the workforce. They need complex skills. They need to have deep learning understanding, not just, rote memorization, easy multiple choice questions, but they need to actually have expectations that they can achieve a deeper understanding of the content. So thank you for your time. And I think with that, we can move to some Q&A.
Thank you to both of you. I certainly have a lot of questions, but this is also a great opportunity for everyone online to use the Q&A option. There should be a Q&A button down below. So if you want to ask any questions, feel free to use that. But I did have a question regarding this sense of loss and isolation. Is there a way, I guess, with respect to the pandemic, that's certainly its own issue, but can this sense of loss and isolation be mitigated with online learning? Or are we really going to be pushing people kind of away by focusing on online learning?
Julie, do you want to respond to that?
So yeah, I mean, I think that there are lots of opportunities to mitigate that. And so that the things that we were talking about with the connection, building in connections with other students and building in connections with the instructional team are really, really important for that. And so we saw a lot of great examples of how instructors were doing that well, and then also a lot of examples of how that was not happening during that period of emergency remote teaching. So I think moving forward, when we keep that in mind and we design that into our courses, they can be very effective.
Yeah, we saw a lot of variety with how instructors were effectively connecting the students with each other. And utilizing the technologies. I think when you have that in mind, then the opportunities start coming about.
Thank you. And another follow-up relates to team dynamics. I really appreciated how you highlighted that that one Intro to Engineering course held some sort of accountability for team dynamics. Are you able to give a little bit more information about the specifics of that?
So are you familiar with the CAE software, a team management tool that was developed by actually one of my colleagues at Purdue, Professor Matt Olin. And it was developed primarily for helping manage teams. So it can both help divide students up into teams. They have training materials like videos and things related to teaming. And then throughout the course of the semester, the students have to submit things through that, and it helps the instructor see when there are problems in the team. And so then they know when they need to sort of hop in or even catch things before they get it. It's essentially, it's for managing student teams. It's called CATME, C-A-T-M-E.
And I guess along those lines, would you say that at this 100 level or this intro level, would this be a good opportunity to try to reframe the idea of engineering being more than just mathematics?
Absolutely. Emphasizing to the students was that, you know, we were going through this pandemic, they were going through it as students, but professional engineers were going through it in their work. And so when they would complain about the things that they were going through, you know, we knew examples from professionals working where they were having to cross that same barrier, innovate the solution that they were going to do so they could continue working with their colleagues. So I think the opportunity was for sure there to help the students see that this is about your profession. This is about you working and how you interact with others, how you make decisions based off of it.
Yes. What type of engineering expertise is conducive to the current means of online learning, and what is not?
So I think the question is when they ask about what type of engineering expertise is conducive to the current means of online learning and what isn't. I think that the things that we're seeing from our study are that you can very effectively do the kinds of things that need to be done technically, as well as professional skills like teaming and those kinds of things. We just have to, take the time to set things up differently. So when we think about what can we do to make sure students are connected with each other, what can we do to make sure that the expectations are clear and they're not changing, and what can we do to make sure that there's plenty of interaction with the instructional staff. I think those are the things that we need to be thinking of as we think about what advances we're going to make in online learning, and that is certainly conducive to any type of engineering expertise, whether we're talking about technical skills or non-technical professional skills like teamwork.
Thank you. And then welcome back, Kerry. And then we'll quickly can do one more question here. Can you speak more on the role of soft skills such as ethics in what's been presented here?
It's really great that we're getting these questions around this because we actually just recently submitted an NSF proposal and have gotten so we're expecting to shortly be funded specifically to look more at the professional skills development and online. So that's coming. But Julie, what do you, I was going to say, now I forget the question.
Yeah, so I think that one of the things what we're hoping to be able to study, if this proposal does come through like we hope, is that we'll be able to actually look at some different engineering non-technical skills and how interactions with other students and how interactions with faculty, both online and in person, really affect that. So I would say, stay tuned for a better answer to that, because we're hoping to have the opportunity to study that soon.
Thank you so much. And I think with that, let's go ahead and thank both Julie and Kerry for this wonderful presentation. And what we'll do is we'll take a short break so we can all get a little water and bathroom break, and we'll start our next presentations here at the top of the hour, 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. So thank you again, and we will resume here shortly.